Now, going over to the political part of the podcast, you have the ATF memo leaking saying they want to ban all gun sales in terms of private ownership. Now, is this the prime example of a red herring? Well, yes, it is actually. It's much, much more about this. Now, thankfully, this information comes to us thanks to ammo.com as well as Iraq veteran 8888, who, in terms of firearm knowledge and production, I can't recommend his channel enough. So he actually reads through a couple of these documents, and his voice is infinitely better than mine. So we're going to play that for a couple minutes and break it down.
The Biden administration will use executive orders and the weaponized ATF to issue a rule limiting the private sales of firearms. According to the New York Times and verified by AmmoLand news sources, the new rule is expected to be unveiled by the end of the year. President Joe Biden plans to announce that he is directing the ATF to close what Everytown calls the private sales loophole and the digital loophole.
Ow, my eyes! They hurt so hard because I rolled them back so much. It's one of those things where the private sales loophole is such a pejorative, silly thing. Kind of like the gun sales or the gun show loophole. It's ridiculous because it's not really. If you look at the statistics on gun shows, 99% of the sales are all through gun dealerships, or rather, more accurately, FFLs, or Federal Firearm Licensees. So that means actually, you have to do paperwork. So it's one of those cliches where people think going to a gun show is Wild West. It's actually a lot more. It's a lot of fun. You see a lot of diverse guns in a very short amount of time. It's kind of the allure of the whole thing. It's a fun cultural phenomenon to go check out. But an overwhelming majority of all those guns there, if you buy them, you're buying from a dealership who's buying a table there to present all their guns. And you have to do a standard background check. You have to fill out a 4473, which is a legal document, federal legal document. Think of it as a job application to buy a gun. But again, if you or I, if we lie on that document, we get 15 years in prison. But Joe Biden's son, Hunter Biden, who is a crackhead, he could lie on that document to basically get no consequences at all. He was smart enough to admit in an autobiography he was on illicit substances, and that time frame was the same exact time frame he actually filled out the paperwork. Yep, 15 years for us, but yep, for him, if he would do that, probably get away scot-free.
The private sales loophole is when an individual sells a firearm for profit but does not possess a federal firearms license, also known as an FFL.
Also, with the digital loophole, that's pretty ridiculous in and of itself. They go into talk about the forums so you can buy stuff. When you talk to the average person on the streets about, oh yeah, I bought it, you can buy a gun online, no background check. Legally, you can buy it in terms of they can take your credit card, but let's say you go to gunbroker.com, and they're not sponsored, but they're just like eBay for guns. You can buy it, but it can't ship to your door unless it's an antique. So if it's a modern firearm, it goes to your local, and you choose your local FFL, Federal Firearms License holder, so local gun store, who again, they have that paperwork with the federal government. You go to that gun store, you fill out the background check, the 4473, they run your name through the NICS system, and then you take possession of the firearm. Everyone thinks if you go online, you just buy it and it goes right to your door. Unless you are an FFL holder, that doesn't happen. But that's what the media keeps pushing, and of course, no one trusts them anymore for good reason, although it pains me that 12 people still tune in probably.
Biden will call on the ATF to develop a new rule requiring anyone who makes any profit by selling firearms to possess an FFL.
It should also be noted the ATF is cracking down on FFL holders, so actually critiquing them more and taking those licenses away, also destroying many people's ability to make a living, which I find disgusting as well. I can't help but say it's not in the Constitution. That you freedom and right to bear arms, except you need a paperwork. I'm confused.
Guns tend to increase in value over time. A gun purchased in 1980 will likely sell for much more money today than its original value. The so-called digital loophole includes marketplaces like Arms List, Firearms Classified.
Now, when it comes to Arms List, I actually bought one of my first guns off Arms List, but it was from a dealer. So I actually went on Arms List, I saw the ad, I contacted the person, it ended up to be a brick and mortar store. I drove all the way to the store, we did the 4473 paperwork, he then ran my name through the system for the background check, and I was able to take possession of the firearm. So again, when they say, oh yeah, these websites are all like that, well, there's also dealerships that use them too.
Where private individuals can list their firearms for sale. The Biden administration wants to see these marketplaces shut down.
There's nothing the government likes, or the modern government likes, more than censorship.
but it's unclear exactly how that unconstitutional goal will be accomplished. Websites like Arms List do not sell firearms directly.
It's quite literally a town square for firearms. You don't buy them from Arms List, they simply facilitate the website where you can connect with people and advertise guns.
In case you guys don't know, a website like that is where potential private sellers get connected essentially, and the platform itself has a complete hands-off approach to the way the transaction is conducted. All they're simply doing is facilitating the people meeting up and discussing what they're wanting to buy, sell, trade, or whatnot, that sort of thing. Ammo Land News spoke to Arms List founder Jonathan Gibbon about the attacks his company faces and the upcoming ATF rule. Arms List has been battling anti-gun groups for years, fending off several lawsuits. Arms List has
It'd be nice if we had more constitutional judges where they saw a lawsuit and they go, oh, ridiculous, throw it out.
perfect track record at
But unfortunately, the Constitution and the Bill of Rights are documents that far elude many people in power, unfortunately.
defeating these attacks, but the cases are costly. Private party transactions are not a loophole, Gibbon told Ammo Land News. Buying and selling firearms is a guaranteed right under the Second Amendment. Interfering with state laws
Also, under this proposed law, you can't sell a gun to a family member. Is that logical? No. Is that unconstitutional? I would argue absolutely.
allowing citizens to exercise their Second Amendment right should concern everyone. Americans have a First Amendment constitutional right to use the internet to communicate about their other constitutional rights. The rule, currently in draft form, is expected to be announced later this year. The announcement will be followed by a public comment period. The Biden administration aims to reveal the final rule by late spring or early summer of 2024 and for it to go into full effect by the fall of next year. The rule is still in the early stages of development, so the timeline is subject to change. Previous ATF rule changes, such as the frame and receiver rule, bump stock rule, and pistol brace rule, have been successfully challenged in court. The courts have ruled
Because again, the ATF is not supposed to make laws, they're supposed to enforce them. But they have the ugly habit of reinterpreting things to de facto make new laws and turn hardworking Americans into criminals overnight as a simple stroke of a pen.
that the ATF does not have the authority to pass these rules, subverting the powers of Congress to make laws. In an attempt to head off another
Now, the danger to you, or the people who possess those items in the meantime, they might not, but they can change the law today, and you're going to have to go fight that in court. And if they catch you, your life can be utterly destroyed.
defeat, the ATF and the Justice Department will claim that the power to require private sellers to obtain an FFL was delegated to them by Congress through the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act. The
Acronyms make it sound smart.
passing of the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act last year changed the definition of what it means to be engaged in the business of dealing firearms. Section 12002 of the law outlines the definition. And of course, you can read all the information at the link that is in the article. And I will tag this particular link down below in the comment, or either in the comment section or in the description box, or both, honestly. Click through if you want to engage in any of the links that you see on the screen, of course. Let's see. The BSCA was a massive gun control bill that passed Congress with the support of some Republicans.
Rhinos. Republicans in name only. Yet another reason not to believe politicians, left or right. Republicans are supposed to, in theory, stand up for gun rights, but I can't help but notice they more and more acquiesce to the left when it comes to that political issue. So I don't trust most politicians as far as I can throw them, and most of them are morbidly obese and out of shape, so it'd be a tough thing to throw them. Granted, I do try to lift when I can.
The bill changed the definition of a gun seller. The BSCA altered the wording of Section 921 of Title 18 United States Code. The BSCA altered the definition of someone engaged in the business of selling guns from with the principal objective of livelihood and profit to the ambiguous statement of to predominantly earn a profit.
That's what politicians love. Ambiguity, where they can gray the lines and they can work it however they want. That's why a lot of these laws are very imprecise. They're quite antithesis, in fact. They're the opposite. So they can cover whatever they want it to cover.
Now the Biden administration is exploiting that change through the upcoming rule. From the text of the BSCA, the term to predominantly earn a profit means that the intent Underlying the sale and disposition of firearm is predominantly one of obtaining a pecuniary gain as opposed to other intents, such as improving or liquidating a personal firearms collection, provided that proof of profit shall not be required as to a person who engages in the regular and repetitive purchase and disposition of firearms for criminal purposes or terrorism. Many gun rights groups tried to warn Republicans, such as Senator John Cornyn, chief architect of the BSCA, that
Where is that rhino from? He's the chief architect, John Cornyn. Let's see here. John, C-O-R-N-Y-N. N-Y-N. Who is this? American politician, born 1952. Jesus. Let's see here. American politician, attorney, and former jurist serving as a senior United States Senator from Texas. Oh, that's embarrassing. We need to disown him. That's disgusting.
that the Biden administration would exploit the anti-gun law, but these pleas were ignored.
Because they don't care about you or your ideals. They just want people to be dumb enough to vote for them. So that's why I highly recommend researching everyone you vote for. Left, right, center, libertarian. Look at their actual voting track record, not their BS political commercials they put out, which just lean into emotional rhetoric, left and right.
The main force pushing for the new rule is Everytown for Gun Safety, the Bloomberg-backed anti-freedom group who sees the new requirements for sellers to obtain an
It's kind of the point where the more nice a group or bill sounds, the more suspicious I am, because more often than not, it is a sheep in wolf, or rather a wolf in sheep's clothing.
FFL to get closer to universal background checks. President Biden and other Democrat politicians have taken millions of dollars from the group, and we need to see the organization's war chest for the upcoming elections. Let's see. Universal background checks have been cornerstone of the Biden anti-gun plan, but so far have been a non-starter in Congress.
Write your representatives today. Tell them you'll not ever accept a universal background checks. Because guess what? It's a de facto gun registration, which again, I know history scores and test scores in the United States public schools are at all-time low. If you get a history book, you'll see that every time since the dawn of time you've had a gun registration, they're always taken away. The worst historical events in history always happen after that, consistently. That's why a lot of people give shit to Ted Cruz. He has one or two good points. One of the brilliant things he did say, which was spot on, is there's only two reasons the government wants to know the serial numbers of your gun: to tax them or to take them. And historically speaking, they do that in that order.
With the president unable to pass any bill that includes universal background checks, the White House is doing what it considers the next best thing. This rule shows the gun community that any compromise will be used against gun rights, and the ATF claiming...
If you give them an inch, they take a mile. When have you ever gotten anything from compromise on this political issue? Have your gun rights increased? Has the 1934 Firearms Act, NFA Act, been repealed in our lifetime? No. Many of the rights are just simply chiseled away, and you get nothing to increase, which is why, if you look at the NRA, they're at all-time... Very few people are joining the NRA these days. The other gun advocacy groups are far more efficient because they actually get things passed and actually fight these tyrannical laws. The NRA does some great safety work. They do safety instructions and trainings, but in terms of political wins and getting rights back, the last thing I remember the NRA being good for was December 12th, 2012, which is when they actually got concealed carry passed in Illinois because they challenged the courts. They said that people have a legal right to do that. But even then, they acquiesced where the people living there have to have a 16 to 20 hours class time and even more physical training, which again is used as a deterrent strategically so that people do not exercise their freedom to write and to actually bear arms.
Authority through the BSCA shows that the recent losses have the ATF scrambling to prevent future losses by pointing to legislation, even if the law has to be taken out of context. All right, wonderful reporting there, Mr. Crump. That's of course exactly what I would expect from one of John's articles. And this is scary. Look, we are going to have to keep a really close eye on this moving forward. Of course, once the comment period is opened up, remember, on the bump stock comment period, we dropped so many comments, and the frame and receiver rule, anything that was open for comments, we rang the bell from the mountaintop, and we got so many people.
Now, when it comes to those comment sections where they open up to the public comment, I don't think we should be deterred to the fact that the ATF doesn't actually change anything when it comes to those comments. Mostly, I think they have once or twice, historically speaking. It really just sends a message to who are your representatives in Congress, because a lot of those folks are severe narcissists. They don't want to lose power. So if you show, hey, my entire district, 80% of the people who vote for me, they think this law is bad. If I vote for it, they're going to vote me out. And that's something people, especially Republicans, need to get better at. When they break their promises to you, vote them out. Don't allow them to get away with chiseling away at your rights. Just brainlessly, left and right, voting for someone just because they have an R or they have a D next to their name. If they don't walk the walk and talk the talk, that letter means nothing. Which, personally speaking, politically speaking, we should just get rid of those. But if you don't know what the person stands for, you shouldn't be voting for them. I don't think we should have Republicans or Democrats or any letter next to the person's name. You should have to articulately know who you're voting for. Now, granted, I would actually be in favor of actually having you write in what your top 1 or 2 or 3 specific things you want them to do. Actually articulate why you like someone. But I know I'm not in charge of voting laws, regulations, so I'll digress.
People to submit comments. Now, what it actually accomplishes, that's probably questionable at best, but you still have to make the effort. And I think that Crump is correct when he, mentions just how, desperate the ATF is for some sort of perceived win. Whether it's because they're trying to pander to the agenda of the Biden administration, or rather, whether they're trying to pander to the existence of their very organization. I mean, think about it in terms of budgets, right? When someone like the ATF gets a budget, if they don't use the entire budget, okay, they won't get their same procurement of money the next year.
So now, use it or lose it.
I'm one of those people that thinks the organization needs to be greatly reduced, if not completely abolished, to begin with. However, they probably look at it in terms of, well, if we don't make ourselves relevant and don't make ourselves useful to the current administration, well, then they're going to cut our funding, or they're going to cut our budget, and then we won't have the same budget next year, or some greatly reduced budget. So the ATF is probably under a lot of internal pressure from their own leadership to do, even if it's just the perception of something, it's still something in the eyes of the current administration. And of course, if the current administration is the one giving them the marching orders, and then of course they comply with those marching orders, well, what do you think is going to happen when it comes down to their budget? They're going to get everything they need. They're going to get all the money they need. This all comes back down to, people having a job. And, the economy is crud right now. Buyer confidence is at an all-time low. Inflation is out of control. Everything is just going nuts right now. I mean, gun sales are way down. The gun industry is at one of the slowest times that it's been in quite some time. I mean, the 2020 boom of sales, really put a shot in the arm of the industry, but we're starting to see that slow down slightly. I think that people are accessorizing, buying ammo, doing training. And in summer now, a lot of folks are spending time with their family, which, of course, I would argue is a much better expenditure of your time and money, especially with how crazy things have been over the last few years with lockdowns and things. So, believe me, even though you have this large organization, they still feel the pinch of things being slow, just like the regular civilian world does too. And I'm certainly not saying that is an excuse for their actions, and I'm certainly not saying that I'm trying to cover for them in some way. I'm just telling you the reality of the way I see what justifies the actions that they're undertaking in their eyes. Now, of course, we know the Biden administration is extremely anti-gun. And
I was going to say, once we get, you see this very cyclical gun sales when it comes to the presidential elections as well, and midterms. I suspect gun sales in maybe 6 months, once we start to get closer to the 2024 election, depending on who's running, most likely right now, the data we have, it'll be most likely Trump versus Biden. You'll probably see an increase in gun sales as well as magazine sales.
Would run them all through a wood chipper if they had their choice. So there's a couple of different ways that this can go down, and the beauty of it is that we actually kind of know already how this is going to pan out, because we know what's happening with the bump stock situation. We know what's happening with the frame and receiver rule. We know what's happening with the brace situation. So all of these things are currently being handed the slap down in federal courts all across the country. So we are gaining back some of this territory. And I think
the dangerous thing is still, though, in the interim, you have the ATF say a rule, and then it's being challenged. There are a lot of good, hardworking folks in the middle who they'll be turned into felons overnight. So it's a very murky
I think, if
situation.
anything, what this sort of ends up doing is it forces the hand of the regime, if anything. So, yes, it's a shot in the dark to say, well, let's just shout this rule out from the mountaintops, and you know what? Maybe people will just follow it and they won't fight against it and they won't challenge it, and then it'll just.
Or maybe it'll get more votes. There are people who want guns banned in the United States. I usually call them un-American, since if you read a book by the founding fathers, which I know literacy and all that type of thing at all time low, but there are people who, if they hear Biden is doing this, they will vote for him again because it's a political issue for a lot of people, and there are people who want to ban them, and then of course there's people who want to actually maintain the individual's right to defend themselves.
Be just as good as law. It'll be de facto law. And maybe from a strategic standpoint, they have the right idea. If you can't get Congress to do anything, it's not like all the previous presidents haven't abused the power of the pen either.
Left
It's
and right.
important to keep in mind. Don't let it cloud your judgment. You need to remember, even Trump, Obama used the.
Trump banned the bump stocks, thereby turning Americans into felons basically overnight. So a lot of people love Trump. He's not 100% pro-gun. And the NRA, they endorsed that idea. Which again, William LaPierre, every time the NRA calls me, I simply ask them the same question, which I know the answer to. Is William LaPierre still your leader? Yes, he is. No, I'm not giving you a penny. Not even half of a penny, which used to be legal U.S. currency way back in the day, which ironically a half penny now would be worth a pretty penny, ironically enough, because it's collectible. But I digress.
Power of the pen. Trump used the power of the pen. In fact, it was Trump's power of the pen that got us the bump stock situation. So if we've got two regimes in a row, two presidents in a row that have handed down some form of executive order moving against guns in some way, it does bring into question what the overall strategic value might be in that. Again, I know people always say 5D chess and this and that, but the truth is, by using executive fiat, it forces the hands of the courts to respond to this in some way. And of course, that's why gun groups such as GOA, FPC,
GOA being Gun Owners of America, which is a great, fantastic group. They've gotten a lot of laws pushed back and defended a lot of Americans' right to keep and bear arms.
NRA, NAGA. There's so many great gun groups that are doing great work and putting their money where their mouth is, and they're putting pressure on these people because obviously we see the legal issues with this. We see how it can be challenged. We see that it's unconstitutional. We see that it's an erosion of our rights. And of course, because of who we are, especially here at GOA, we are in zero compromise 2A group. So we're obviously going to go after every single thing that could even have the inkling of being an infringement.
It's basically the antithesis of the NRA, which is compromise step one, step two, every step.
But the point remains is that you almost wonder if perhaps maybe the people that are just going along with this know what the end goal, or let's just say the end result is going to be from the very get-go. And again, I'm not giving anyone credit, and I'm not saying that people are playing 5D chess, but you almost have to wonder if even some of the rank-and-file folks at the ATF are thinking to themselves, Joe, this isn't going to go anywhere. You might get a temporary relief for what you're trying to accomplish, but in the long...
But that can still help them into the polls, because remember the student loans? Vote for me, you won't have to pay them back. We're going to put them on pause. And he even said, I don't have the constitutional power to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway when it came to the student loan relief. Or more accurately, someone else paying for your mistakes. So he knew it wasn't going to stick, but it still was a good politically for him because it was advantageous and got more votes. So that could also be what is happening here as well.
Long term, perhaps they even know that the courts are going to slap all of this down. And you just have to wonder if maybe they're so tired of being used as a pawn in that way and not being given the privilege of having to, have something go through Congress per se. Maybe they even feel like, gosh, maybe we should just enact all this stuff, pass every rule he wants. Yeah, throw the whole laundry list at it, and then the courts will throw it out. It could go either way. And again, I'm not trying to give anyone credit in either direction. I'm just saying, to be fair, to be unbiased in this situation. Just look at the reality of human behavior, the reality of who we are, the reality of our goals politically, whatever it may be in life, right? You have to kind of consider all of the options. And I just almost wonder if even they know, and when I say they, I mean the ATF, if even the ATF knows, oh my gosh, this is just a giant cluster. Who knows? We haven't really seen a heck of a lot of enforcement action take place. I mean, now they've gone after some of the forced reset triggers,
Hypertext,
which I will be discussing in a different video soon, so I won't get into a lot of detail on that. I'm going to be doing a completely new video on that particular thing. But they have carried out some enforcement actions, but I just fail to see the long-term success of these actions.
And I was going to say, I won't play the whole thing. It goes on for a couple more minutes, but that's also another concerning thing is selective enforcement of the law, where more often than not, it's used against you depending on your political affiliation. So when it comes to this situation, it's every gun owner should be actively involved in politics, because they could be turned into a criminal the next day and not know it. Inadvertently, accidentally breaking the law. And again, legally speaking, that's no excuse. Still gonna get in trouble. So again, fervently write to your political representatives accordingly, and we'll see where this certain situation, where this certain scenario goes to the ATF. Thank you again for taking the time to tune in today. We're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers by the end of August, so you can click that button. I would greatly appreciate it. Also, don't forget to take the time to like and comment. The feedback greatly appreciated and helps grow the channel. Also, and lastly, don't forget to tell your family, tell your friends, tell your coworkers, heck, tell your enemies, tell anyone and everyone. Just stay safe and fight the good fight.